The Jesus Trilogy, Book 2, Then There Were Two, Chapter 11. For he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny. 3 cheers and another round of drinks all around, yelled Judas, a little slur in his voice. Johnny tried to get up off the chair to high-five Judas, but he toppled over in a heap on the floor. Jesus bent over to see if he was all right. Johnny roared with laughter. He hadn't had so much fun since his own wedding. He'd hardly been able to eat for quite some time and would lay awake nights reviewing the events of that fateful night on the ferry. Diana was constantly begging him to see a doctor and find out what was wrong. His weight was down and training camp was opening in a week. She had become pregnant and her jealous streak was worse than ever. Elizabeth had moved in with them, but that lasted only a week. Diana's fits of rage and anger aimed toward him and her mother-in-law finally brought things to a head. Johnny moved Elizabeth into a small house across town. He promised to visit her often, but Diana threw a fit every time he did. The added expense of a second home started to stretch their budget. His weight loss brought doubts into his mind as to how he would perform on the professional gridiron in the fall. He was becoming a nervous wreck, and he was sure someday soon Barabbas would find out the terrible truth that he, Johnny, had killed his best friend's father. Johnny was a drinking man, and was even more true to form this night. It seemed that his life was peaceful only when he had a little alcohol on board. Despite her shortcomings, Diana realized this and encouraged him to tackle the problem face to face, mano a mano, as he always did in football. But her pleadings fell on deaf ears. Peace and happiness for Johnny seemed wrapped up in a little bottle. Diana hoped that when the football season began and the baby came, he would get away from his troubles and the alcohol, but she wasn't sure what his troubles actually were. He had everything: a house, money, football, her, a lovely woman, and a new baby on the way. She wondered if she was part of it. Her tummy was showing and her large breasts were becoming more generous. Maybe he didn't find her attractive enough anymore. She would stare at her figure in the mirror. She was beautiful even at 3 months pregnant, and she knew it. No, must be something else, but what? His mother? Maybe. She vowed to go over and see her sometime soon. She loved Johnny with all her heart, was not about to lose him and her lifestyle to anything or anyone. He was her prince, and she would do all in her power, which was considerable, to keep everything status quo. Come on, Jesus, have some of this brandy. It will make you feel so good. No, I couldn't. Judas swayed over to him, put his arm around him, and said, "You know, man, you don't always have to stay in control. Sometimes you just gotta let your hair down, let it all hang out. Otherwise, everything gets so penned up inside you and starts to get jumbled. You finally can't even think straight." Oh, and then it happens. What happens? Johnny said, still laying on the floor. You know, you should have been a professor, Johnny said to Judas. Or maybe a principal, Jesus thought, but did not say. The distant memories of his and Judas' little cheating scandal suddenly flared in his mind, but quickly he swept them away. I said, what happens? Johnny said, nearly pulling Judas over onto him. Well, when the pressure gets too great, it snaps. It just snaps. What snaps? Johnny asked again. Your pea-sized brain, Judas said, and then began to roar with laughter. Hey, I'll have you know I got a large brain, Johnny said. But the other organs are small, Barabbas said from the corner. He had been talking to 3 other guys at this bachelor party, but overheard the less than soft voice of Judas. Barabbas had a hard time since the funeral. He wouldn't work or eat. He just sat at home and stared most of the time. Wouldn't even see his girlfriend Dorian. Hey, Judas boy, when does the real party start? Barabbas yelled from the corner. Should be any minute, Bub. Bub was the nickname the horseman had given Barabbas. First it was Arm, but one day Coach Vincenti called him Bub by mistake, and it stuck. We didn't come here for drinks and conversation. We came here for girls. This is my good pal, Caesar's last chance to sample the goods of the world, and I mean goods, Judas said. So who'd you get to come for to treat our friend Jesus, the lonesome inn, Judas boy? Barabbas asked. Yeah, who's coming and when are they getting here? This party is dulling out, a companion said. Should be any minute now. Patience, guys, patience. I'm a guy and I'm not patient by nature, Johnny said, rolling on the floor and laughing. Judas heard a knock at the door, and above the cackling band of guys, he went to the door. The girls were there, and he escorted them around to the back. All right, girls, get in line and get in order. I'll announce you one by one. When the music starts, you come in. Mal, you're first. You know the order. The girls shuffled and finally were in line. Judas escorted them to the back door. He opened it, and the girls followed him inside to a small room in the back of the building. And he had them wait there while he went out into the main room of the hall. All right, everybody. It took a couple minutes for the cackling to die down, but it eventually did. Judas told his guitarist friend Jazik to begin playing. All right, everybody, get ready for the most spectacular show on earth. Ladies and gentlemen, Judas said, his voice fairly high-pitched. There ain't no ladies here, the voice rang out. Oh, yes, there are, Judas called back. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mal, Queen of Egypt. Guitar music, which had been fairly subdued before, instantly zoomed to full volume. Walk Like an Egyptian was the tune, and Mal could really rock it. She sashayed through the back door wearing a black bra that left little to the imagination and some black short shorts. Whistles and catcalls filled the room. She paraded in front of each guest, swinging her somewhat hippie hips, and finally got to the guest of honor, Jesus. She leaned over, put her arm around him, and planted a big kiss on his right cheek. It left a big red mark in the shape of her sensuous lips. He was clearly uncomfortable, but managed a weak smile. The cheering and howling got even louder. When the guys realized how uncomfortable Jesus was, it crescendoed. They loved it. The smartest one in the class, the football star marrying the prettiest girl in the class, even he could be made to squirm a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, Judas began again, but his own laughter stopped him from continuing. It took him a while to regain his composure. He lost it again. Finally, he yelled out in his high-pitched voice, Here she is, all the way from Syria, Landa. In came Landa, a tall, dark-haired beauty. Her hair piled high on top of her head in an exotic curled formation made her appear even taller. She walked into the room and the whistles grew even louder. Landa was tall, probably 6 feet, but very thin, too thin. But she could walk, and walk she did. Barabbas drooled as she walked by him. Johnny rolled his eyes and nearly passed out. Her walk was very hypnotic. When she finally got to Jesus, he looked down. He was getting aroused, and he really wished he were somewhere else, anywhere else. But it was not to be. There were his friends. He could not hurt their feelings, and he knew they would grab him and hold him down anyway. He tried to make a move for the door. So he just sat still in a chair and stared at the floor. Landa put one of her long, sinewy legs on each side of his thighs and squeezed them together. She then kissed him full on the lips. As he pulled away, she said, See you later, big boy. She was incredibly sexy. She was too thin, but her walk could arouse a cement statue. Jesus kept staring down at the floor. What would Mary think if she saw him now? He knew she would hear all about it. One thing he learned was that women could not keep secrets. He had come to the conclusion that it was just part of their nature. They were party to certain information. They were compelled to pass it on. However, he had also come to the conclusion that it was just another part of their vivacious appeal. God had certainly outdone himself when he created women. He often wondered what woman angels looked like. He expected Mary, his mother, and Mary, his fiancée, were of that same beautiful mold. He started to relax a little as he thought of his wonderful Mary. He looked up to see the last few feet of Landa's walk and thought to himself, "My baby's walk is even more sensuous than yours." Nonetheless, he couldn't seem to control his arousal. Thoughts of his Mary now made his problem worse. And now all the way from the Greek Isles, Rhina, the one had on a this one had on a Greek toga, but it was gathered tightly about her huge bosom, exhibiting more cleavage than any of them thought possible. She too was hippie, but no one seemed to notice. Johnny thought, "She's even bigger than my Diana." Fatter might have been a better term, but no matter. It was a night of fun. She too swayed through the crowd of wide-eyed Neanderthals and made her way to Jesus. She stood right in front of him, grabbed his wavy-haired head, put it between her breasts, and shimmied. The music climbed a few more decibels when she pulled away from him, and her toga did not follow. The cloak fell to her ample waist, and the cheers got even louder. She pulled her toga up and ran out of the room as if it had been an accident. More than likely it was by design. "And now for the piece de resistance," Judas said as loudly as he could, but no one heard him the name Gentile. No matter, his pretty bride-to-be weaved through the crowd of 30 boys, and she clearly loved every minute of it. When she got to Jesus, she stared into his eyes, slowly cocking her hips from side to side. She had on a white skimpy bra and even more skimpy white panties. He couldn't help it. His arousal would not go away. Using her woman's intuition, she sensed this, and she sat down on his lap. She too kissed him full on the lips. It lasted more than a minute. As she finally pulled away, she whispered in his ear, "I want to see you. Call me sometime." She then walked slowly out of the room, but not before she went up to her fiancé Judas. She gave him a peck on the cheek.